God willing, we'll be reading today from Surah number 17, verse 59. Let's all seek refuge in God from Satan the rejected. A'udhu billahi minash shaitanir rajeem. Bismillahir rahmanir rahim. Old kind of miracles made obsolete. What stopped us from sending the miracles that the previous generations have is that the previous generations have rejected them. For example, we showed Thamud the camel, a profound miracle, but they transgressed against it. We sent the miracles only to instill reverence. We informed you that your Lord fully controls the people, and we rendered the vision that we showed you a test for the people, and the tree that is accursed in the Quran. We showed them solid proofs to instill reverence in them, but this only augmented their defiance. And the footnote says, for verse 60, Muhammad's journey to the highest heaven to receive the Quran, as stated in 17:1 and 53:1 through 18, is a test because the people had to believe in Muhammad on faith. Okay, so we see from these verses that all the old kind of miracles were made obsolete, and because the previous communities already rejected them, so after that, God substituted it with more proofs with other miracles, and the same miracles were not presented. And obviously, that's why we have the Quran's mathematical miracle, and not these old kinds of miracles. And God says that the vision that we showed to Muhammad was a test for the people because they had to be tested based on their faith, right? Now we no longer, this is an era of proof, right? People don't just believe on blind faith. It's based on proof, scientific evidence. We have the mathematical miracle that proves beyond any doubt that this is God's unaltered word. God says we showed them solid proofs to instill reverence, but this only augmented their defiance. So the proofs that were shown to people, augmented their defiance because they rejected them out of ego, and it caused them to further go astray. Satan dupes the people. When we said to the angels, fall prostrate before Adam, they fell prostrate except Satan. He said, shall I prostrate to one you created from mud? He said, since you have honored him over me, if you rest with me till the day of resurrection, I will possess all his descendants, except a few. He said, then go, you and those who follow you will end up in hell as your requital, an equitable requital. You may entice them with your voice and mobilize all your forces and all your men against them, and share in their money and children, and promise them anything the devil promises is no more than an illusion. As for my servants, you have no power over them. Your Lord suffices as an advocate. Your Lord is the one who causes the ships to float on the ocean, that you may seek his bounties. He is most merciful towards you. So we understand from these verses that Satan dupes the people in masses. God says when the feud broke in the heavenly society and Satan was required in the end to fall prostrate when Adam was created from mud, it exposed his arrogance, it exposed his ego, and the prostration was not to Adam, it was to God, but for something that God had, because of something that God had made, and instead, Satan's ego was exposed because he felt that he was more superior, and why he would have to prostrate, in front of it, and he promised God at that point that if God grants him a respite, that he will possess all the humans on earth except a few. So majority of the humans, and he's allowed that, basically. Um, he wanted to be a god on earth, and God allowed him to have his constituents to show that he can be a god besides God, and also all those constituents he's going to take with him to hell eventually. And we see that he is allowed a lot of power that has been given to him by God to do what he wants to do, right? But his power does not work over servants of God who are dedicated to him alone, right? So that's why it's really important for us, in order for us to be protected from Satan's influence and from being subjugated to all the afflictions that are caused by Satan as well in this world too, that we must be dedicated to God alone. We must be reverent to God alone, right? And he's allowed to entice people, right? I mean, how does he entice people? With his voice, with his forces, with all the men, and with the money and the children that are given to all these men, right? And promise them. The devil promises people. How does the devil promise? We know that the devil, disguises himself in lies and makes promises to people, either as, lies attributed to God, or just in general, just lies, ideas about, promises of, fake happiness, with illusions, with so many things, that are completely worldly, as well as things that are attributed to God as part of the religion, you know, and he dupes the people. And we can see that, this is Satan's goal, and how he is succeeding in his goal by taking the majority of the people with him. And we can see how easy it is for Satan to take these people once he realizes that they have a weakness, that they're not dedicated to God alone. He finds a way. He figures out a way. God allows him to take those people because God knows that they're not dedicated to God alone, because of something within them that they are doubtful about God's absolute authority, and that these people end up going to hell with him. And the promising part is interesting. Devil promises people to become stingy by putting fear in their hearts, for example, and promising them that if they hold on to it, that everything will be fine. He promises people salvation if they believe in idols like Jesus, Muhammad. Promises people success, and prominence, or whatever else that they think. Promises them salvation if they do things like circumcision, which is satanic mutilation in itself. Mutilation. Devil promised God that he will command them to destroy God's creation. So all these are promises, that false promises that Satan makes, that he eventually breaks all of them. Right? Never keeps his promise. And even though he does try to be a God, he does try to give them happiness, but he simply cannot do it. And eventually he's just lying to them about the things that he's promising them in terms of religion. And so eventually, especially in the hereafter, these people will be so shocked, right? But God's servants, who are dedicated to God alone, he doesn't have any power over them, right? And this is why we see that there's so few people that could be saved. When you look at the majority, you look at the numbers, and we feel comfortable in the numbers. You have 2 people on one side, and you have 10 people on the other side, and the 10 people are going to feel more comfortable because they feel like they're in the majority, right? But we know Moses was left with only 2 believers, right? Moses, who was given such powerful miracles, and these people, more than 2, who saw those miracles in front of their eyes while they were alive ended up not becoming believers, ended up becoming not believers, right? Um, so, it's very rare actually, to see people who are actually true believers. Everybody claims to believe, everybody thinks they believe, right? But at the end, as we'll see in the hereafter, the believers are the minority of the minority. God says in the Quran, most people will not believe, and most of the people who do believe, end up failing, falling in some kind of idol worship, and we see that around us, right? Um, and so God says in verse 66, "Your Lord is the one who causes the ships to float on the ocean, that you may seek His bounties. He is the most merciful. He's most merciful towards you." And the footnote says, "We now learn from physics and physical chemistry that water possesses unique qualities that render it perfectly suitable for serving our various needs." Right? So water, with its peculiar properties, chemical properties, makes it ideal for existence of life on Earth, and makes it ideal for giving us so many benefits, right? Um, you could give a whole sermon, I guess, about or two about water and its importance in this world, and it's what a blessing it is to have, and how it possesses all these properties that lets it be an essential element for existence of life on Earth. And if we don't have water on Earth, I mean, we'll simply die, right? um, within no time. And so this is God's blessing that He has, and it has a lot of properties, special properties, like the tension on the surface tension, and all the other properties of water uh, that make it ideal for us. So God will now continue reading. "Bad weather, friends. If you are afflicted in the middle of the sea, you forget your idols and sincerely implore Him alone. But as soon as He saves you to the shore, you revert. Indeed, the human being is unappreciative. Have you guaranteed that He will not cause the land on shore to swallow you? Or He will not send upon you a tempest? Then you find no protector? Have you guaranteed that He will not return you to the sea another time, then send upon you a storm that drowns you because of your disbelief? Once this happens, we will not give you another chance." So God talks about bad weather friends, right? There's fair weather friends and there's bad weather friends. And fair weather friends are the ones that will only worship God when things are going their way. And when things are not going their way, they make an about face and start objecting and complaining and stop worshiping God, stop believing in God. But then there's also bad weather friends, which I feel are very common, which is people who only worship God when they're in trouble. Right? I mean, it's a common occurrence we see all around us that people never think about God or believe in God, and when they're just going through a very difficult time, then they remember God and they praise God and want to worship God. Um, so this, what does this show us? That it shows us that, like it says, indeed the human being is unappreciative, right? So in the good times, we have everything, we have all the blessings, we have everything going our way, but we cannot appreciate God at that time. I mean, to turn to God at the time for the blessings we have, why are you turning to God when you don't have blessings? When you have blessings, you should be thanking Him, you should be worshiping Him, loving Him, and praising Him, right, for all the blessings. And so that's why, our test is designed to prove that we worship God under all circumstances, to prove that we're not just fair weather friends or not just bad weather friends. True friends are there. True friends are friends under all circumstances, right? So we have to prove that we will not just worship God while things are bad, or not only while things are good. We worship God under all circumstances, right? And those are the people who pass their test, and that's why we have the admissions test. And the admissions test, obviously, puts you in a condition where it's a fair weather, where weather is good, and one where weather is really bad. You know, uh, to under all circumstances is very thorough, very comprehensive. And we know that the examples of Job and Solomon are the extreme ends of the testing spectrum. Meaning, Solomon was tested to one extreme with abundance and wealth, and he was given so many powers, so many abilities, talking to ants, talking to birds, having control of jinns, so many things. Not just material wealth. Um, and and Job, on the other hand, was tested with lack of everything, loss of everything. His health, his wealth. So many things. And God restored everything for him in the end after passing his test, right? So we have to remember that we will be tested, and we shouldn't be just fair weather friends or bad weather friends. People implore God. Let's say when they're drowning or something. I mean, it reminds me of one of the famous singers, Cat Stevens, who actually was drowning in his own words, and then he prayed to God that if he save him, if he's saved by God, that he will dedicate his life to worshiping him. Obviously, there was no Muhammad at the time, right, or anybody, and he just prayed to God, and then God saved him, and then he became a traditional Muslim, and started became an idol worshiper. Right? I mean, there's many stories like that. So the human being is unappreciative, and God says, He can send you another time back to the ocean. You never know. You could be flying, for all you know, and your plane could just land in the water, and you could end up in the ocean. Or there could be so many other scenarios. You could just end up in the water. A tsunami can happen, and you can end up in the water. Or there can be a flood. Or any kind of storm, and so, or the land can swallow you. I mean, anything can happen. For all that we know, a plane can just fall out of the sky. And but people don't fear God. People don't reverence God as they should, and don't worship Him as they're supposed to. God says, once this happens, we will not give you another chance. Verse 70 says, we have honored the children of Adam and provided them with rides on land and in the sea. We provided for them good provisions, and we gave them greater advantages than many of our creatures. The day will come when we summon every people together with their record. As for those who are given the record of righteousness, they will read their record and will not suffer the least injustice. So God says that He has honored the children of Adam and provided them with rides on land and in the sea. We can see how many different kinds of rides we have in the land and the sea, how many privileges and facilities and services that God has put on our fingertips, for us, given us many advantages, greater advantages than many of God's creatures, right? I mean, we're physiologically at an advantage than many of God's creatures, mentally, and so many ways. And God has given us all of these blessings so that we can be appreciative and worship God. 71, the day will come when we summon every people together with their record. As for those who are given the record of righteousness, they will read the record and will not suffer the least injustice. So on the day of judgment, obviously, we're all going to be accounted for the things that we have done, and nobody, will be treated unfairly on the day of judgment. In this world, we can see things happen that, people may think is unfair, but on the day of judgment, there's no such thing, right? It's absolute justice. 72, as for those who are blind in this life, they will be blind in the hereafter, even a lot worse, right? So now this is not talking about the physical blindness. This is talking about people who are blind in this world from seeing the truth, They will also be blind in the hereafter, but they will be actually a lot worse. They will not have any light. God says, they'll be in darkness and misery, and so they will be a lot worse than just what they are in the position they are now. Yes, they're miserable now, but in the hereafter, they're going to be a lot more miserable, right? A lot more miserable. God strengthens the messenger. They almost averted you from the revelations we have given you. They wanted you to fabricate something else in order to consider you a friend. If it were not that we strengthened you, you almost leaned towards them just a little bit. Had you done that, we would have doubled the retribution for you in this life and after death, and you would have found no one to help you against us. They almost banished you from the land to get rid of you, so they could revert as soon as you left. This has been consistently the case with all the messengers that we sent before you, and you will find that our system never changes. So God says that He strengthened the messenger because the people wanted the messenger to compromise on the truth, just a little bit, so that they could consider him a friend, so that he could be accepted. And God says if the messenger did that, it will have terrible consequences, and God would double the retribution for him. So obviously that shows to us that the messengers don't compromise, on God's message. And it's not just limited to God's commissioned messengers. Any believers or submitters cannot and should not ever compromise on God's message. To consider people, for acceptance, right? For friendship, and because obviously, if you do that, then you can expect the same consequences. And then God says that they almost banished him from the land to get rid of him, so they could revert as soon as he left. So they would rather be stuck in darkness than to follow the messenger and to follow the truth. People love their opinions and their idols so much that they would rather just be stuck in darkness and not have to see a messenger of God guide them, right? And this has consistently been the case. They try to banish and get rid of God's messenger. They try to silence the messenger in whatever way possible, either by killing him or some other schemes, and this has consistently been the history. And God says that you will find that our system never changes, and God has a system in place, and we know what that system is and how He supports His messenger, how He supports the truth, how He annihilates the disbelievers, the hypocrites. And so God says His system never changes. The noon prayer, verse 78, you shall observe the contact prayer, Salat, when the sun declines from its highest point at noon, as it moves towards sunset. You shall also observe the recitation of the Quran at dawn. Reciting the Quran at dawn is witnessed. So we see that the noon prayer is mentioned here specifically in the Quran, and the prayers are decreed at specific times, as another verse says. And so the noon prayer here is mentioned by the fact that the sun declines from its highest point at noon. So it's mentioned by name as it moves towards sunset. You shall also observe the recitation of the Quran at dawn. Right? So reciting the Quran at dawn is also very important. The noon prayer, all our 5 prayers are extremely important. They are as the Master says, the main meals, the steak and the lobster for our souls. We can snack anytime, right? And we should also snack anytime. But we have to do our contact prayers, Salat, and they're mathematically proven, right? And this is important because, God wants us to remember Him every time, right? It was suggested by, some hypocrites recently that remembering God would make the religion, remembering God more frequently could make the religion difficult. Like, why why would you have to mention God's name before doing anything, right? Isn't that something that makes religion difficult, right? And we know that any worshiper of God alone, I mean, should rejoice in remembering God. It's our own benefit to remember God always, and God gives us a chance to remember Him, and He tells us that we must remember God at any occasion, right? Under any occasion, and especially this is very clear in the appendix, also that says, "Who is your God?" Right? We should try to find excuses to mention God's name on any occasion, remember God on any occasion, right? Mentioning God's name in vain is wrong. I mean, sometimes people may confuse that. But mentioning God's name in vain means that you're mentioning God, just to appear righteous, But remembering God under any situation is not wrong, right? I mean, people have taken it to another level by saying you shouldn't mention God's name for things that they're not necessary, right? Like, I remember I had used to have this roommate when I was younger, and I mean, I think there was something going on at the time. I don't know if he was drinking or something, and I think he was in the process of leaving or something. And then he said something. I said, "God willing," and he got so upset and annoyed, and he says, "What does God have to do with this?" You know. And but we know that believers are happy when they mention God, and if you have an opportunity to remember God, I mean, it should make you happy. It shouldn't be a burden on you, right? It should be something that you want, right? I mean, and what is a commandment, anyways? I mean, when the messenger says, or God says, worship God day and night, what does that mean? Does that mean it's making the religion difficult for us? No, I mean, that's what a submitter is. If you still don't understand what it means to be a submitter, I mean, being a submitter is not just doing your prayers and giving to charity and then just getting on with your day like you don't know, right? I mean, that's not submission. I mean, if you think that I mean, a lot of people do think, and I can tell you for a fact that a lot of people do think about submission in this way. I mean, they come and they read like, "Oh, wow, that's great. Like, we don't have to do all those things that traditional Muslims do, and this is so simple." And then they just go about doing their minimums, right? The very minimums, like maybe just doing their contact prayers, and maybe and giving to charity, and then they think that, yeah, they can just do whatever they want. Yeah, I mean, if you don't want to make it, most likely that's what's going to happen. But if you are serious uh, in making it in the hereafter, you want to make God your God, you have to work hard. God says He created the human being to work hard to redeem himself, right? So you just want to go about your day, not even mention God's name to remember Him. How are you gonna make God your God? It's very it really surprised me, like, and people were calling it an innovation, right, or a personal opinion, but I mean, what do we think? Like, you wanted to go to paradise, where you live happily ever after, and you're just gonna get it like that. I mean, of course, you have to work hard in life, and you have to remember God. I mean, otherwise, you're just gonna be, swayed very easily by Satan, right? So, the prayers, the contact prayers, the meditation, these are all ways for us to remember God. And so, of course, you can imagine that for such people, how difficult it would be for Satan to move these people away. I mean, these will be like, you know, very solid people. Their souls are so heavy on the day of judgment and in this world that Satan cannot do anything. He cannot tempt them in any way. He cannot, get them to sin so easily, and he cannot confuse them because they're dedicated to God alone. Um, so, verse 79 says, "Meditation during the night, you shall meditate for extra credit, that your Lord may raise you to an honorable rank. And say, My Lord, admit me in honorable admittance, and let me depart in honorable departure, and grant me from you a powerful support. proclaim the truth has prevailed and falsehood has vanished. Falsehood will inevitably vanish. So God talks about meditation here. Meditation is very important. Remembering God. Meditation does not mean that you empty your mind and then just float in the in nothingness, right? It means that you empty. They missed the important part, which was, okay, you empty yourself of all the worries and things of this world and bring God into the picture, right? Fill that void with God, right? But they took God out of it and just said, just make it empty and just nothingness, or you just can't think of anything. Like there's nothing. Like your brain is like, I don't know, reminds me of Homer Simpson's meme, with the thing in his head where there's a monkey, playing drums, right? I mean, that's not what meditation is. Real meditation is to focus on God, right? To think about God, to be mindful of God, right? To not be mindful of just your breathing, right? Doesn't make any sense. I mean, you can, to bring your focus to God. You can try to do breathing exercises. That's good, but the goal is not to just do that. I mean, the goal is to worship God, right? And you don't even have to do all that fancy stuff, right? I mean, if you just remember God, think about God, really. I mean, you don't have to do any of those things, right? And it's just, meditation has lost its meaning in this society. But we know we meditate on God's qualities, on God's attributes, and we praise Him and glorify Him. And God shows us how it's done. We have the example from the messenger as well. And God willing, I will try to speed up here a little bit, since I see that my battery is getting low too, so I need to get my charger quickly. So it says, when I say my battery is low, I mean not my battery, like the computer. Okay, so healing and mercy, verse 82, we send down in the Quran healing and mercy for the believers. At the same time, it only increases the wickedness of the transgressors. When we bless the human being, he becomes preoccupied and heedless. But when adversity strikes him, he turns despondent. Say, everyone works in accordance with his belief, and your Lord knows best which ones are guided in the right path. So God tells us that, the Quran is healing and mercy for the believers, right? Anything that troubles your hearts, there's a solution for us in this Quran. And, it's a manual for success in this life and the hereafter. But at the same time, this same book will increase the wickedness of the wicked people, and we can see that they find every excuse to commit all kinds of tyranny and oppression and murder. I mean, you name it, and he does all of these things in the name of religion, in the name of Islam, and use verses from Quran to justify those actions. Right? If you look at hypocrites, they will do the same thing. They'll commit all kinds of evil things under the guise of their apparent faith, as God says in Surah 2, right? And use these verses, and then they have no access. They have no access to the Quran. They don't have access to the true meanings behind the Quran, and so they look at it from the surface. It's like a blind person. You can feel it's there, like they can touch the book, but they don't know. They can't decipher it and actually apply it in their life in the way they're supposed to. They can't see anything. It is truly. It is truly fascinating, when you see that with your eyes, that you see that the truth is there. It's, but they can't see it. So God says, when we bless a human being, he becomes preoccupied and heedless, verse 83. But when adversity strikes him, he turns despondent. So these are people that that basically are unappreciative, right? When they are blessed by things from God, they become preoccupied and heedless. And then when bad things happen, they may also turn despondent. So there are people that may not be fair weather or bad weather, that just are not friends, right? In the sense that they're not happy when they're not turning to God when things are going well, and they're not turning to God when things are bad. So both scenarios, they're just not doing anything. And God says that everyone works in accordance with his belief, and your Lord knows best which ones are guided in the right path. So God knows where everybody is, and people may think that they're on the right path, but God knows who is truly on the right path. As far as we know, all the people from all religions in the world, they think that they're on the right path, right? But we know what the right path is. Um, Whether we're on it or not is another story, but at least we know what the right path is based on the proof that God has given to us. Based on the Quran's mathematical code, we understand that we have been given the divine truth from God, and we have no doubt about it. But there's many other groups that are totally on the wrong path, and they think that they have the truth also, right? And so God says everyone works in accordance with their beliefs, and God knows what is in everybody's hearts, and God knows which ones are guided. Some people may accuse you of following falsehood and accuse you of following personal opinions, but God knows who's on the right path. Divine revelation, the source of all knowledge. They ask you about the revelation, say, the revelation comes from my Lord. The knowledge given to you is minute. Um, if we will, we can take back what we reveal to you, then you will find no protector against us. This is but mercy from your Lord. His blessings upon you have been great. So everything, all the knowledge that we have in this world, all the AI and all the technology, all the inventions around us, everything, God is the source of all of the creation, all of its knowledge. Anything, that we see on this world, whether it's created by man or it's, just natural, God is the source of all of this. God is the source of our religion. God is also the source of all the information that we know of math and science and everything else. Mathematical composition of the Quran. Say, if all the humans and all the jinns banded together in order to produce a Quran like this, and they could never produce anything like it, no matter how much assistance they lent one another. We have cited for the people in this Quran all kinds of examples, but most people insist upon disbelieving, right? So we understand that the Quran's mathematical miracle cannot be challenged by any human being, even if all the humans and all the jinns in the world banded together. I mean, that is one, unimaginable, formidable alliance that one can think of, the most amazing alliance that you can possibly have with the most power and resources that you can put together in today's technology. I mean, you cannot produce anything like it. That's the power of Quran's mathematical composition, right? And God says we have cited in this Quran all kinds of examples, but most people insist upon disbelieving. I mean, that's a universal fact, as we know, that Quran has all kinds of examples, all the details, and everything is explained to us. Everything that we need to know for our salvation is here. It's explained, but still, most people insist upon disbelieving and disputing the truth. God willing, I'll end here. If you guys have comments or questions, please feel free. Thank you.
MashaAllah, thank you, brother.
Thank you.
MashaAllah.
Right back.
if you don't mind, brother, I would love to talk about that because we see that quite often in the Quran where it says, meditate at night. God observes the meditators and stuff like that, right? I could be saying that incorrectly, but it does say God says numerous times that like those who observe the meditators, it's a good thing. Like like how, please explain it to me how you would perceive it as meditating. Is it just you kind of laying down at night and just thinking of all the greatness of God, or what would you suggest?
Sorry, brother Justin. I was just getting my charger for my laptop.
That's okay.
Yeah. So
I was asking about the meditation, brother. Like how do you do it? Well, like has the messenger ever kind of explained what God means by meditation?
yeah. So there was several places where the messenger talks about meditation. Even reading the Quran, thinking about God, is a form of meditation, right? Reading the Quran at any time, thinking about God's attributes, whether you're walking, sitting, standing, doing anything, driving, just commemorating God. We have good examples in one of the audio Quran studies. Well, not the Quran studies, from the recording from the Night of Destiny. They're doing some commemoration. So commemorating God, singing His attributes, it's a form of meditation, right? So just doing anything that helps you remember God is meditation. I mean, God talks about frequent prostrations at night, imploring Him, asking for forgiveness. So all these are forms of meditation. So we have good examples in all of those. Others can chime in too if they want.
No, that makes sense. It's just I think as anybody who tries to submit, you want to make sure that you do things correctly, right?
Mm-hmm.
So that makes sense, though. Yeah, there's a good video. I think the Night of Destiny meditation. That I'll sometimes follow along.
Mm-hmm.
You know, that's what I use sometimes.
Yeah, it's actually audio, right?
Yeah, audio.
Yeah, but there's then someone made it into a video and actually shows how what is being said in it. But there's also like a PDF transcript that is available too that you can read along if you want help understand the Arabic portions of it, some of the attributes and stuff um, from the Night of Destiny. Especially, yeah, that's especially relevant for us here now in Ramadan, right? Um, so if you go to, so this is audio number 14. God willing, I'll share the link in the chat and also on WhatsApp. So just can bookmark it. Mm. Yeah, so the Quran's mathematical miracle is truly, I mean, this challenge that God has talked about here. They can never produce anything like it, no matter how much assistance they lend to one another. I mean, it's really fascinating. Like, even with today's, technology that we have and all the powerful computing resources that you can combine, I mean, you cannot produce anything to of this magnitude. Like, you might even make some numbers, but any additional uh, things you add to a literary composition with a mathematical structure, would end up getting degraded more and more and more. And if so, yeah, it will be completely unreadable by the time it's it's like you even like if you started with rules and you put like 20 different things, if you from 20 to 21, like you would see a significant drop in the readability of that text. As you started adding more and more rules, it would become impossible to just make up simple sentences, let alone like the stories that God talks about, right? It's not like random stuff, right? It would have to be coherent and something that is beautiful and wants to guide us, and then having this mathematical structure, and on top of that, having the structure written by someone who has no idea about the Quran's mathematical code, right? Didn't have a computer even, you know, and so yeah, it is completely impossible, right? Especially, I mean, and think about it this way, like, if you this is not even telling someone to write a book, and it should satisfy these parameters. It should just say, write a book, any book, and then, or pick any book other than the Quran, and just try to find the mathematical code in there, right? Try to find a mathematical code like this in it. It's impossible, right? They can't find it because it doesn't exist, right? Because it's impossible. But even if you try to make a book, let's say I tell someone to compose a story, and start adding all these mathematical parameters, yeah, it's gonna be impossible. At one point, the story is not even gonna make sense, right? But subhanAllah, this is God's design, right?
Yeah, it's impossible. Impossible. You couldn't even pretend to attempt it.
Mm-hmm.
It'd be incoherent nonsense, right?
Mm-hmm.
But it's God's signature,
Mm-hmm.
Clearly God's word, right?
Yeah.
Yeah, there aren't any mistakes either. I think back to what the messenger was saying, like, you have several people or dozens of people that have, computers and stuff to store the information or write it down, right? And I mean, that, like you said, it makes you appreciate the miracle even more, because errors were still made, like
Mm-hmm.
writing a number wrong or in the wrong order, like 2145, like 2541 or something.
Mm-hmm.
And several heads, dozens of brains working on it. So yeah, it really makes you appreciate. Um, it just proves even more, that one man or couldn't do this. I mean, you didn't even have computers or anything, back then.
Yeah, I mean, they didn't have calculators, let alone computers. They
And
didn't
there's
have.
no contradiction,
Yeah.
like not one.
Mm-hmm.
Like that's wild, right? Everything follows this mathematical code, and
Mm-hmm.
then when you just look at it as a literary piece, like taking away the amazing fact of its mathematical code. Literally, it's very concise. There's no contradictions whatsoever. It explains, like, there's many miracles within it. You know what I mean? Like, it's a fully comprehensive book and scripture, right?
Yeah, I mean, and it rhymes too, right? And then you have the memory bells that helps people memorize it too, right? So all of these things, make it truly extraordinary. Right? It's a perpetual miracle that anybody can witness at any time, right? So I mean, that for us is a huge responsibility, a huge responsibility. Like I want to emphasize on huge, but not sound like Donald Trump. Huge.
There's many miracles. Like the one that really got to me, I remember when I was first kind of reading the Quran. The amount of words where it says land and the amount of words that say water is if you were to divide the two, it's the exact ratio of water on Earth and land on Earth. Like that's crazy, Like that's illogical. Like nobody could think of things like this, right? Or the fact that the Earth, like we just found out in the 90s that the Earth is what would they call it? Not perfectly round. Yeah, not perfectly round, but like it's bulbous in the middle. You know what I mean? And I calculated this out once just to find out what the difference is. The difference of diameter on the circumference versus the not the circumference. The circumference around the equator versus the latitude. Yeah, 300 kilometers. That's nothing. That's nothing. That's like so insignificant when it comes down to how large the Earth is. 300 kilometers is nothing. But the Quran knew. You know what I mean? Like it's amazing. God does all things.
Yeah, also, God's signature, as we know, is within us too. Like, as it says, when the human beings are born, it takes 38 weeks for the development of the child, in the fetus, and exactly 38 weeks. And then we have 209 bones in our bodies, right? Now, the science right now disagrees with the number of bones, but it's because they decided to, split certain bones and count them as more than one bone, right? Because some of those bones were actually fused together. But really, there's God's signature. That's the same signature that we find everywhere in the universe, everywhere on Earth, in all its creation, right? So it's not just like you tell them to find any code, find 19. Uh, and it's very difficult, being a prime number. And so, subhanAllah, I mean, this is really, I mean, I just pray to God that, we pass our test because, like I said, it does bring a great responsibility, and having the message is one thing, being presented with the truth is another thing, but what we do with it is also very important, and how we live our life, determines. Just the fact that we have the truth doesn't mean that we made it, right? And we know that many people are going to hell. So it is a sort of a a balancing act in a way to live in this life. I mean, we have to, like, for example, not be too extravagant. We have to be not stingy. We have to be not nice to everybody. We have to be not harsh with everybody. There's people you have to be harsh with. There's people you have to be kind with. I mean, um, you have to, make sure you follow all of these commandments under all circumstances. You're tested with, good times, bad times, and Satan's constantly trying to, take people with him. But we know that his promise only works for people who are not fully committed to God, right? If they have other reasons for being in this path, you know, then definitely they're gonna fall very easily. Are there any comments or questions about the verses? Anyone else? Anyone? Okay. Well, I did also have like an off topic. I think it's amazing. It's Ramadan, and it's amazing that um we're able to fast on the right day of Ramadan, right? Uh, People all around the world are fasting a day later. I mean, in the past, most of these people did not want to accept the scientific calculation for finding the first day of the lunar calendar. Now they do, but they end up fasting a day after that, right? And definitely, Satan has tricked them by telling them that not telling them first of all like when the night of destiny is, by confusing them about the night of destiny, and not knowing when the night of destiny is anymore, and but they still believe that it's in the odd nights, right? But they miss it still because they just increased it by one. So even if they thought that, okay, it's going to fall on the 27th night, so they'll fast on their 27th, 29th, but it will actually, I mean, they will commemorate on the 27th and let's say 23rd and the 25th and the 29th, but they'll be off by one, so they'll still miss it, And subhanAllah, thank God that we have the information by God's leave that God has clarified these things for us, and based on that information, we can pinpoint exactly the date that we're supposed to start fasting, right? MashaAllah.
Thank God.
Yeah, thank God. Yeah, I'm fascinated by like how they can't see it.
Active ignorance. It's like they don't want to see, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, but I mean, even I believe they go by uh, calculating it based on the lunar data, and they still end up fasting a day later.
Satan's a deceiver, brother.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, didn't Rashad say something about like how they wait for the moon or something. Like they're still doing like an age old
So they were
thing. I
doing it,
remember
at
hearing
least
that.
in the US, they were doing it before, right? And now, I think in the recent years, if I'm not mistaken, they started following the calculation, but the way they don't know how to do the calculation. The way they calculate is it it ends up falling a day ahead. You know.
Okay, so yeah, they still have it wrong.
Yeah, they still have it wrong. But you know, previously there was a chance that they could catch it, right? Let's say that they were
Right.
able to see the moon, but now they have no chance. They're almost always they're always gonna miss it. So
Let's just say though that like there was no calculation, and I like let's say it was camping or something like that. It's when it's no longer the new moon, like the first day of no longer being a new moon. Am I correct on that?
it's the first day that is no longer. So okay. So let me just explain. So basically, what happens is you have. So let me actually try to share my screen. It might be easier that way. Um, so here, let's show Netherlands, because I don't know why I put Netherlands, Jaffer. Let me share. Okay, so I'm gonna share. Presentation. Okay, so Nicholas capture. Yeah. Okay. So to make it smaller. There's a filter there. Yeah. Okay. All right. So if you see here, let me make it bigger, right? So actually, let me make it smaller. So I have the dates here, right? For Netherlands, let's say, right? So you can find it for any place um, by adding it from the list, right? So you can find out anywhere in the world what time the prayers are under by going to word practices and then clicking on add and finding the location anywhere in the world, typing it, and then it will tell you when their fasting is and all the prayers are. So let's say I click on fasting, I added these places. So I'm gonna click on Netherlands, right? So clicking on the first day, so it shows you here when the moonrise time was, right, and when the local sunset time was, right. So
Oh wow, I didn't see that before. That's cool.
yeah, mashallah, thank God. Yeah, so this is for our own sanity, you know, that we know for a fact. So we have in, your local time, like it's for Netherlands. So based on their time, the local sunset was at 6:34 p.m. and then on the 10th of March, and then the moonrise was before that uh, at 10 a.m. Right. So if the moonrise was after 6:34, then technically 11th will not be the day. But since the moonrise happened before the sunset, then that means that the night has started now, right? You're following the night. Like, so when the moon rises, you know, before the sunset, then that sunset that comes after the moonrise, that's the first night. And then after the night is the first day. Right? So just think about it for a little bit. I know it takes time to sink in sometimes when the beginning. So if 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 the moon rises after the the sunset of that day, then it's supposed to be not the 11th but the 12th, right? But since it's before, then it's the 11th, right? Like if you look at, for example, on the 9th compared to the 9th, this was after the sunset time. So in other words, so that's why we didn't have it on the 10th, right? But but the sunset that happens following the moonrise, that's the first night. I think that's the best way to describe it. So look at the moonrise time, right? In order to simplify, look at the moonrise time. After the moon has risen, the first sunset that you see after the moonrise, you know, that's going to be the night. That's when the night starts.
Okay, so it always starts on the 9th,
On the
basically.
ninth, you said ninth?
No, night as in
Night. Yeah, yeah,
I.
yeah. In lunar calendar, night comes before day, right?
Okay, yeah, that
Yes.
makes a little more
Yeah.
sense. Okay.
Yeah. So when we say that with the night of destiny, you know, the night of destiny is actually the 26th day following the 26th day of fasting. You do the
Yeah. I think
commemoration.
it's interesting too, it's like how the night, um like the times, constantly change, because they like if you look at 10 years from now, I think Ramadan will, I think, be more closer to the winter months, which is pretty amazing, because it pretty much makes it to where in every season, even during the hottest times of the year, you're gonna have uh you're gonna have to fast. It's God's system, because if it just fell in a certain like months, let's say the spring, the fall, or something, you'd never, I guess,
Mm-hmm.
be able to maybe be tested as such, if you want to look at it that way, or like during the heat of the summer or something. You know. I think this year is a little cooler too, which is nice.
Mm-hmm.
At least from in Texas, but last year was really hot. Thank God.
Texas is hot.
No, last year it was. This year is actually quite cool.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I don't know if the beginning of the Ramadan last year in Texas was, but it was when it got towards the middle. It was just super dry too.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, thank God. It's much easier these last couple of years. My first fast was 10 years ago, and I was in construction, and I was working like 12-hour shifts. And up here, up north, you only have like three hours of nighttime. So thank God, it's much easier this year for sure.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, mashallah.
Alright, are there any other comments or questions? Anyone? Um, if not, God willing, we can conclude the study and maybe just talk offline for a few minutes. Um, So, thank you all for joining us. God willing, our next English Quran study would be on Saturday at 9:30 a.m. Pacific time. God bless you all. Assalamu alaikum.